Welcome to Creep to Sleep. We're the voice in the dark you actually want to hear. Hit subscribe. We're always just a story away. The fog rolls in. The bus coughed to a stop, its brakes hissing like an angry serpent. Alex peered out the window. The sign was there, weathered and barely legible. Lake Gloom, next right. But there was no bus stop, just a muddy patch of ground and a wall of trees that seemed to press in, daring them to enter. "Lake Gloom?" Alex asked the driver, a burly woman with tired eyes. "End of the line for you, kid," she grunted, already pulling Alex's duffel bag from the storage compartment. "Good luck. You'll need it." Alex swallowed, a knot forming in their stomach. The driver's words weren't exactly reassuring. They stepped off the bus, the humid air instantly clinging to their skin. The bus rumbled away, leaving Alex alone with the trees and the unsettling silence. It wasn't the peaceful silence of nature. This felt heavy, expectant. Taking a deep breath, Alex hoisted the duffel bag onto a shoulder and started down the overgrown path indicated by the sign. The air grew noticeably cooler as they walked, and a faint, earthy smell filled their nostrils. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwined like skeletal fingers. It was definitely gloomy. After what felt like an eternity, the path opened into a clearing. And there it was, Lake Gloom, a cluster of weathered cabins huddled around a vast, still lake. But it wasn't the cabins that caught Alex's attention. It was the fog. A thick, swirling blanket of white clung to the lake's surface, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. It crawled up the shore, snaking between the cabins like a living thing. The camp looked deserted. No laughing children, no counselors bustling about, just the eerie silence and the omnipresent fog. Alex walked towards the largest cabin, a sign above the door proclaiming it to be the main lodge. The screen door creaked open as they pushed it, revealing a dimly lit room filled with dusty furniture and the faint scent of mothballs. A woman stood behind a large wooden desk, her back to Alex. She was tall and thin, with her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a dark green uniform that seemed to absorb the light. "Hello?" Alex said, their voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. The woman turned, her face as severe as her hairstyle. Her eyes were sharp and gray, like chips of flint. "You must be Rivera," she said, her voice raspy. "I am Ms. Griselda, the head counselor." "It's nice to meet you," Alex said, trying to sound enthusiastic, but Ms. Griselda's gaze made it difficult. "Don't expect any pleasantries here, Rivera," she said, her eyes narrowing. "This is not a vacation. It is a job, and a demanding one at that." She gestured to a stack of papers on the desk. "Your contract. Read it carefully, and this," she slid a single sheet of paper towards Alex, "is a list of rules. Memorize them." Alex picked up the list. The rules were unusual. 1. Lights out at 9 p.m. sharp. No exceptions. 2nd, no swimming in the lake after. Dark. 3. Campers must be in their cabins by 8 p.m. Escort them personally. 4. No fires except in the designated fire pit. 5. Report any strange occurrences immediately. 6. Under no circumstances are you to approach Cabin 6. Cabin 6? Alex's curiosity piqued. "What's wrong with Cabin 6? They asked. Ms. Griselda's face tightened. "Cabin 6 is off limits. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Alex said, though they didn't understand at all. "Good. Now, your cabin is number 3. The campers will arrive tomorrow morning. You'll be responsible for a group of 10-year-olds. Their names are on the list. Be prepared." She handed Alex a key attached to a large wooden tag with the number 3 burned into it. "Dinner is at 6 p.m. in the mess hall. Don't be late." With that, Ms. Griselda turned back to her work, dismissing Alex without another word. Alex left the main lodge, the list of rules clutched in their hand. Cabin 6. What could be so terrible about one cabin? They glanced towards the lake, the fog swirling more intensely now, obscuring the opposite shore completely. It felt like the camp was being swallowed whole by the mist. Cabin 3 was small and rustic, with 2 sets of bunk beds and a small, rickety table. It smelled faintly of pine and mildew. Alex dropped their duffel bag on the floor and sat on one of the lower bunks. The mattress was thin and lumpy. They pulled out the list of rules again, staring at the 6th one. Under no circumstances are you to approach Cabin 6. The warning was so stark, so absolute. It only made them more curious. Alex stood up and walked to the cabin door, peering out into the fog. The air was thick and damp, and the silence was broken only by the occasional creak of the trees. They could barely see the other cabins through the swirling mist. Their eyes scanned the area, searching for any sign of Cabin 6. After a moment, they spotted it. It was set apart from the other cabins, further down the shoreline and partially hidden by a thicket of trees. Even from this distance it looked different, darker, more ominous. The windows were boarded up, the wood weathered and cracked. The door was sealed shut with heavy chains and padlocks. It looked like it hadn't been used in years, decades maybe. A shiver ran down Alex's spine. There was something profoundly unsettling about that cabin, something that went beyond the boarded-up windows and the rusty chains. It felt wrong. They turned away, trying to shake off the feeling. They were just being silly. It was probably just an old, abandoned cabin, nothing to be afraid of. But as they went back inside, Alex couldn't shake the image of Cabin 6 from their mind. The fog seemed to be getting thicker, pressing in on the camp, isolating it from the rest of the world. And in the distance, Alex thought they heard something, a faint, almost imperceptible tapping sound, as if someone or something was knocking on the door of Cabin 6. Rules and whispers. The counselor's cabin, a long, low building smelling of pine and damp canvas, felt marginally less oppressive than the main hall. Inside, bunk beds lined the walls, each claimed with a scattering of personal items. A half-deflated volleyball sat forlornly in a corner, next to a stack of board games with missing pieces. It looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. 2 other counselors were already unpacking. One, a lanky guy with a mop of sandy hair and a perpetually nervous smile, introduced himself as Ben. The other, a girl with bright pink hair pulled back into a severe bun, gave Alex a curt nod and said, "Chloe." "So," Alex said, trying to sound more confident than they felt. "Anyone know the story with Cabin 6? Ben's smile faltered. He glanced at Chloe, who remained impassive. "Ms. Griselda pretty much covered it, right? Stay away." "Yeah, but why?" Alex pressed. "It's boarded up, chained. It's a little dramatic, don't you think?" Chloe finally spoke, her voice sharp. "Look, just trust us on this. You don't want to go near it. Bad things happen there." "Bad things? Like what?" Alex persisted, but Chloe just shook her head and started meticulously folding a pile of t-shirts. Ben busied himself with arranging toiletries on a rickety shelf. The silence hung heavy in the air. Later, after unpacking and claiming a top bunk near a window that offered a sliver of a view of the lake, Alex wandered towards the mess hall. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. The air grew colder, carrying the scent of pine and something else. Something damp and earthy, like decaying leaves. Inside the mess hall, the clatter of silverware and the murmur of conversations filled the cavernous space. Ms. Griselda stood at the head of a long table, her gaze sweeping over the assembled counselors. She rapped a spoon against a water glass, the sound cutting through the din. "Attention, everyone," she announced, her voice amplified by the high ceiling. I trust you've all familiarized yourselves with the camp rules. Let me reiterate one point for emphasis. Cabin 6 is off limits. Understood. A chorus of, "Yes, Ms. Griselda," echoed through the hall. Alex noticed a few counselors exchanging uneasy glances. "Good," Ms. Griselda continued, her eyes lingering on Alex for a moment. "Now, eat up. We have a long day ahead of us tomorrow." During dinner, Alex found themselves sitting across from Ben and a couple of other counselors they hadn't met yet. The conversation was light, mostly about previous camp experiences and the challenges of dealing with preteen campers, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was being deliberately avoided. As dinner wound down, Alex overheard snippets of hushed conversations from a nearby table. "Saw something moving in the window." "Always happens at the end of the summer." "Cabin 6. Alex leaned closer, trying to catch more, but the speakers lowered their voices further, their words, dissolving into an unintelligible murmur. Later that night, after lights out, Alex lay in their bunk, staring up at the rough-hewn ceiling. The cabin was silent except for the rhythmic breathing of their bunkmates and the distant hoot of an owl. But then Alex heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from outside. It was barely audible, but persistent, like fingernails scraping against wood. It seemed to be coming from the direction of Cabin 6. Alex held their breath, listening intently. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low, guttural whisper. They couldn't make out any words, but the sound sent a shiver down their spine. It was a sound of pain, of desperation, of something profoundly wrong. They wanted to wake Ben or Chloe, but a strange paralysis gripped them. They were afraid of what they might find, afraid of confirming their growing suspicion that Camp Lake Gloom was harboring a dark secret. The whispering faded, and the scratching resumed, louder this time, more frantic. Alex pulled the covers over their head, trying to block out the sound, but it persisted, echoing in their mind long after it had stopped. Sleep offered little respite. Alex tossed and turned, haunted by fragmented images of boarded-up windows, rusty chains, and shadowy figures lurking in the woods. They dreamt of Ms. Griselda's stern face, her voice echoing, "Cabin 6 is off limits." The next morning, Alex woke up feeling exhausted and anxious. The sun was shining, but the cheerful light did little to dispel the lingering sense of dread. During breakfast, Alex watched Ms. Griselda closely. The camp director seemed to be everywhere at once, issuing instructions, overseeing the kitchen staff, and greeting the arriving campers with a forced smile. After breakfast, Ms. Griselda gathered all the counselors in the main hall. "All right, everyone," she announced. "Time to get to work. Counselors, familiarize yourselves with your assigned cabins and activity areas. Make sure everything is in order. And remember," her voice dropped, becoming low and menacing, "Cabin 6 is strictly off limits. Anyone caught near it will be immediately dismissed. Is that clear?" Her gaze swept over the assembled counselors, lingering on Alex for a moment longer than necessary. Alex nodded, their heart pounding in their chest. As the counselors dispersed, Alex felt a hand on their shoulder. It was Ben. "Hey," he said, his voice low. "I know you're curious about Cabin 6, but trust me, it's not worth it. Just stay away." "But what's in there, Ben?" Alex asked, their voice barely a whisper. "Why is everyone so afraid?" Ben hesitated, glancing around nervously. "I can't tell you," he said finally. "Just promise me you'll stay away." Alex looked into his eyes and saw a genuine fear there, a fear that mirrored their own. They nodded slowly. "I promise," they said, even though a part of them knew that promises were made to be broken, especially when secrets were involved, especially when those secrets whispered in the night. The day crawled by. Alex helped the campers settle into their cabins, led a nature walk, and supervised a chaotic game of dodgeball. But their mind was never far from Cabin 6. They found themselves constantly glancing in its direction, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. Later that afternoon, during a brief lull in activity, Alex spotted Ms. Griselda heading towards the woods, carrying a large padlocked toolbox. Curiosity overcoming their fear, Alex followed her, keeping a safe distance. Ms. Griselda disappeared into the trees, and Alex crept closer, peering through the foliage. They saw her standing in front of Cabin 6, the toolbox open at her feet. She was examining the chains that secured the boarded-up door, her face grim. As Alex watched, Ms. Griselda pulled out a wrench and began tightening the bolts on the chains, her movements deliberate and forceful. It was as if she were reinforcing a prison, making sure whatever was inside could never escape. Alex's blood ran cold. What was she so afraid of? And what or who was trapped inside Cabin 6? They knew, with a chilling certainty, that they had to find out. Campfire stories and shadows. The air tasted of wood smoke, a comforting weight on the cool evening. Alex perched on a felled tree, the bark's texture a subtle abrasion against their denim. Around them, a ring of faces glowed in the shifting firelight. The younger set, burrowed in their sleeping bags, alternated between wide-eyed wonder and subdued apprehension. Campfire night, a hallowed Camp Lake Gloom custom, meant chilling tales courtesy of the senior counselors. Ben, sprawled against a venerable oak, commenced the ritual. "All right, you little gremlins, gather round," he intoned, his voice a theatrical hush. "Tonight, you'll hear the story of Old Man Hemlock." He paused for effect, letting the fire's theatrics take center stage. Legend has it, he haunted these woods long before this camp even existed, a cantankerous old soul, perpetually griping about the commotion. Then, one day, poof, gone, vanished like smoke. A few campers gasped, their eyes widening. Ben grinned, relishing the reaction. But it's said on nights like these, when the fog rolls in like a spectral tide, you can still catch snippets of his complaints echoing through the trees. And if you really pay attention, he leaned forward, eyes gleaming, you might glimpse him, lurking just beyond the firelight. Chloe, balanced on a nearby boulder, feigned disbelief. "Oh, come on, Ben, that's just a scare tactic for the fresh meat." Yet a tremor betrayed her bravado. "Is it?" Ben challenged, arching a brow, "or is it a fair warning?" The question hung in the smoky air as he tossed another log onto the blaze, sending sparks spiraling skyward. The subsequent narrative proved even more disquieting. Sarah, a seasoned counselor, recounted tales of campers lost to the woods over the years, swallowed by the wilderness, never seen again. Each story ratcheted up the unease, each vanishing more perplexing than the last. Alex noted the glaring omission, no mention of Cabin 6, or anything even vaguely resembling it. A palpable restlessness rippled through the group. Even Alex felt a shiver trace its way up their spine. The shadows seemed to lengthen, contorting into grotesque parodies of familiar shapes. The wind whispered through the leaves, sounding like a chorus of secrets. Finally, Ms. Griselda, a silent sentinel at the edge of the circle, cleared her throat, the sound sharp and decisive. "All right, that's enough ghost stories for one evening," she declared, her tone brooking no argument. "Time for lights out, everyone. Move along now." Relief washed over the campers as they clambered to their feet, their nervous prattle filling the stillness as they headed for their cabins. Alex assisted with tidying up, feeling a curious blend of liberation and dissatisfaction. Questions about the tales, the missing campers, clawed at them, but Ms. Griselda's implacable expression dissuaded any inquiry. As the last campers disappeared into their respective lodgings, Ms. Griselda turned to Alex, her gaze unwavering. "You performed admirably tonight, Alex," she commended, her voice softening a fraction. "But remember my words. Certain things are better left dormant." Alex nodded mutely, unsure how to respond, the unspoken words hanging heavy between them, referring to Cabin 6. The enigma that was morphing into an irresistible fixation. The campfire diminished, throwing elongated dancing shadows across the clearing. Ben and Chloe started back to their quarters, but Alex lingered, fixated on the dying embers. "Everything all right, Alex?" Ben inquired, sensing their hesitation. "Yeah, I need to see something," Alex replied, their voice barely audible. Ben sighed, a sound of resignation. "Alex, don't do this. You know you shouldn't. Just for a moment," Alex pleaded, their voice laced with entreaty. "I just need to witness it." Chloe shook her head, her expression grave. "This is a terrible idea." But Alex was already moving away, towards the looming tree line. Ben and Chloe exchanged apprehensive glances before reluctantly giving chase. The path ahead was engulfed in darkness, the overgrown trail barely discernible in the fading light. The temperature dipped, and fog, thick as cotton, clung to their ankles like spectral hands. The sounds of the camp retreated, replaced by the rustling foliage and the solitary hoot of a distant owl. At last, they stood before it, Cabin 6. Even at a distance, a palpable aura radiated from it. It materialized from the swirling mist, a somber, imposing structure. The boarded-up windows were akin to vacant eye sockets. The wood was aged and decaying, draped in moss and grime, possessing an archaic quality, as if it had stood there since time immemorial. Alex halted, their heart hammering against their ribs, held captive by its presence. The air surrounding the cabin was stagnant, oppressive. They could almost discern something, observing them. The silence was complete, save for the sound of their own ragged breathing. Alex reached out a hand, tentatively touching one of the planked windows. The wood was frigid and moist, rough against their skin. Suddenly, a burst of wind tore through the trees, causing the branches to thrash and moan. The fog intensified, enshrouding the cabin in a ghostly embrace, momentarily obscuring it from view. For a fleeting instant, Alex thought they perceived movement behind one of the boarded-up windows. A faint flicker, a fleeting shadow. They gasped, recoiling their hand as though burned. "Did you perceive that?" they whispered, their voice tremulous. Ben and Chloe stared intently at the cabin, their faces ashen in the failing light. "Perceive what?" Ben questioned, his voice strained. "I thought I saw something shift," Alex insisted, their eyes wide with apprehension. "Behind the window." Chloe shivered, her teeth chattering. "It's just the fog, Alex. It's playing tricks on your vision." But Alex felt otherwise. The unnerving sensation lingered, that they had witnessed something concrete, something animate. The wind intensified, howling through the trees like a tormented spirit. The shadows writhed and twisted, rendering clear vision impossible. A wave of panic washed over Alex. They desperately wanted to flee, to distance themselves as far as humanly possible from Cabin 6. "We have to leave," they stammered, their voice barely audible. "We need to leave now." Ben and Chloe needed no further encouragement. They whirled around and bolted, back towards the relative sanctuary of the campfire, back towards the warmth and light Alex followed close behind, their heart pounding a frantic rhythm, their eyes scanning the shadows warily. They didn't stop until they reached the perimeter of the clearing, where the fire still danced, casting a comforting, welcoming glow. They collapsed onto the fallen log, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. The campfire seemed smaller now, less reassuring. The shadows stretched further, more menacing. Alex couldn't shake the feeling of being scrutinized. They glanced back towards the woods, towards the dark, imposing silhouette of Cabin 6. It stood there, impassive, shrouded in mist. Waiting patiently, Alex knew with a certainty that resonated deep within their bones that their encounter with Cabin 6 was far from over, and whatever lurked within possessed a danger they could scarcely comprehend, tapping in the night. Sleep remained elusive. Alex's gaze was fixed on the rough-hewn ceiling overhead, the suffocating darkness pressing down. Below, Chloe's gentle snores contrasted sharply with Ben's restless shifting across the small space. Alex, however, remained captive to the campfire tales and the disquieting visage of Cabin 6. Then a sound, a faint metronomic tick, tap, 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 so delicate they almost wrote it off as a product of their overstimulated imagination, but it returned, sharper this time, slicing through the nocturnal hush. Tap, tap, tap. Alex stilled, straining to hear. The source seemed external, originating from the woods, or more precisely, from the vicinity of Cabin 6. A cold wave washed over Alex. A soft nudge to Chloe's bunk yielded only an incoherent murmur, and a roll towards the wall. A lost cause, clearly. The tapping persisted, insistent and unsettling. Weighing the option of waking Ben, Alex dismissed it. He'd merely offer some logical explanation, a branch scraping against the wood, something easily explained away. Ben always sought the rational. Slipping from the bunk, Alex's feet met the frigid floorboards. Silently they edged toward the window. Peering through a crack in the curtains, they struggled to pierce the gloom. The fog had returned, shrouding the camp in an ethereal blanket. The tapping resumed, amplified now. Tap, 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 undeniably emanating from Cabin 6. Its shadowy outline was barely visible through the swirling vapor, a menacing sentinel at the forest's edge. A fleeting movement snagged their attention, a shadow, or a trick played by the fog and dim light. Alex couldn't discern. A drumbeat thundered in their chest, a chaotic blend of trepidation and morbid fascination. Trouble sleeping too, huh? A sudden voice nearly propelled Alex through the roof. A diminutive figure occupied the doorway, backlit by the faint moon. "Billy?" Alex whispered, recognizing the impish grin even in the dimness. Billy, a younger camper known for his slight build, unruly hair, and talent for mischief, padded into the cabin. "Yep, that's me," he confirmed. "Heard you stirring. What you looking at?" His eyes widened as he took in Cabin 6 through the misty veil. "Whoa, creepy." "Did you hear that tapping?" Alex asked, their voice barely audible. Billy tilted his head, listening intently. "Yeah, I hear it. Spooky, huh? Do you know what it is?" A shrug. "Probably just the wind, or maybe it's a ghost." He flashed a mischievous grin, clearly relishing Alex's unease. "Don't say that," Alex retorted, unable to completely banish a shiver of apprehension. "What? Afraid of ghosts?" Billy teased. "No," Alex replied defensively. "I just don't believe in them." "Maybe you should," Billy said with a cunning smile. "Camp Lake Gloom is full of secrets." "Like what?" Alex asked, their curiosity piqued despite themselves. Billy leaned closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. "Like Cabin 6. They say it's haunted. Someone died there a long time ago, a camper." "That's just a story," Alex insisted, trying to project an air of confidence. Is it? Billy raised a skeptical brow. I overheard Mr. Peterson say never to go near it. Ever. Alex frowned, recalling Mr. Peterson's reputation for enforcing rules. Billy's grin widened. I dare you to peek inside. Absolutely not, Alex said, aghast. I'm not going anywhere near that place. Chicken, Billy challenged. I'm not chicken, Alex countered. I'm being responsible. Responsible or just plain scared? Billy pressed, relentless. Alex shot him a glare. They couldn't deny it. Fear was taking root. The stories, the tapping, the camp's unsettling ambiance. It was all getting under their skin. Fine, Alex conceded. I'm scared. You happy now? Billy chuckled. Just kidding. But seriously, everybody's spooked by Cabin 6. Nobody knows what's really up with that place. The tapping continued, a persistent rhythm against the silence. Tap, tap, tap. Alex wrapped their arms around themselves, shivering. It's probably just the wind, they repeated, as much to convince themselves as Billy. Wind can do some weird stuff. Maybe, Billy conceded, but I wouldn't go near it if you paid me. He paused, dropping his voice to a hush. They say if you get too close to Cabin 6, it'll snatch you right up. Alex rolled their eyes. That's ridiculous. Really? Billy countered with a knowing glance. Just be careful, Alex. This camp, it's not what it seems. With that, Billy vanished back into the night. Alex remained at the window, eyes fixed on Cabin 6, the tapping resonating in their mind. Tap, tap, tap. The wind, they repeated internally. It had to be. Yet, deep down, Alex knew something was amiss. Something was profoundly wrong at Camp Lake Gloom, with Cabin 6 lurking at the heart of it all, the old journal. A glacial draft permeated the common room, a stark contrast to the summer afternoon. Alex, still reeling from Billy's cryptic warnings, felt an unnerving prickle on their skin, the sense of unseen eyes boring into them. Every timber groan and leaf scuttle seemed amplified, resonating with a disquieting undercurrent. Attempting to ground themselves, they fussed with games and books, a futile effort to ignore the pull of Cabin 6 and its veiled history. Sunlight, diluted by grime-coated windows, illuminated a flurry of dust. Reaching behind a stack of Camp Lake Gloom Mad Libs, a title dripping with sardonic irony, their hand bumped against something unexpected. A slender, leather-bound journal, secreted away as if intentionally forgotten. Alex's pulse quickened as they retrieved it. The leather was time-worn and scarred, its original hue faded to sepia. The aged pages, brittle as autumn leaves, emitted a faint, earthy aroma of old paper and bygone days. No title, no identifying marks adorned its cover. Casting a wary glance at the doorway, Alex settled at a solid wooden table and gingerly unfurled the journal. The initial leaves were barren. Then, in a delicate, antiquated hand, entries began. June 12th, 1957. The lake churns with unease tonight. Even Hemlock, usually so stoic, seems rattled, muttering about the sleeper awakening. A sense of foreboding grips me. A frown furrowed Alex's brow, a sudden chill tracing their spine. Sleeper? What sinister entity did that name conceal, and who penned these words from the past? Another counselor, lost to time? They flipped the page. July 1st, 1957. The children's dreams are plagued. They whisper of lurking shadows and voices in the night. I offer solace. Yet my own sleep is haunted by identical specters. The others advise ignoring it, prioritizing camp activities, as if a spirited game could drown out the rising tide of dread. Alex inhaled sharply, nightmares, shadows, whispers, an echo of their own unease, of Billy's tales, of Camp Lake Gloom's oppressive atmosphere. The journal served as a portal to a past that refused to stay buried. Continuing, their eyes devoured the fading script. July 15th, 1957. The rituals escalate. Hemlock insists they're vital, that they restrain the sleeper. But I witness the dread lurking behind his pronouncements. He's not controlling anything, merely offering appeasement. The cost? Unspeakable. A queasy feeling rose in Alex's stomach. Rituals? What disturbing practices transpired at this forsaken camp? August 3rd, 1957. Little Timmy wandered again today, discovered him near the wood's edge, fixated on cabin 6, speechless, trembling. Hemlock punished him for disobedience, but his eyes, they reflected my own terror. Alex's thoughts flashed to Max, the missing camper. Had he too been lured to cabin 6? Was there an invisible thread connecting them? The journal was weaving a tapestry of dread, a chronicle of a place consumed by fear and secrecy. The handwriting devolved into a frantic scrawl, the entries becoming terse and fragmented. August 18th, 1957. The lake transmogrifying, darker, icier. Something immense stirs in its depths. August 25th, 1957. They know I'm documenting this. Their eyes bore into me. Hemlock dismisses it as paranoia, a figment of my imagination, but I know they conceal a terrible secret. September 1st, 1957. The sleeper awakens. I sense it in the wind, the earth. We are all imperiled. The final entry, dated September 5th, 1957, was a single ragged line. Its inside C. The words ceased abruptly, the ink smeared as if the writer had been violently interrupted. The subsequent pages lay blank. Alex stared at the unfinished phrase, heart hammering. It's inside C-. Cabin 6? Was the sleeper imprisoned within those decaying walls? A wave of nausea crashed over them. The journal felt like a leaden weight in their hands, a tangible manifestation of buried horrors. Snapping it shut, their fingers trembled. The common room seemed to shrink, shadows deepening into menacing shapes. Every sound resonated with heightened menace, each creak a potential harbinger. Alex felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the eyes of the past scrutinized them from the journal's pages, from the darkened windows of cabin 6. Someone needed to know. But who would believe them? Hemlock seemed more invested in maintaining a facade of order than exposing the truth. The other counselors remained blissfully unaware or purposefully blind. Alex resolved to act. The journal was a key, a fragment of the enigma that was Camp Lake Gloom. They would expose the truth, regardless of the repercussions. A chilling premonition slithered into their thoughts. What if the truth was beyond comprehension? What if the sleeper possessed power beyond imagination, a malevolence that defied containment? Clutching the journal, hidden beneath their shirt, a sense of doom settled heavily upon them. They were no longer simply a counselor seeking purpose. They were a pawn in a sinister game where the stakes dwarfed any expectation. With a deliberate breath, Alex rose, concealing the journal. A choice confronted them. Ignore the journal, dismissing it as the ravings of a disturbed mind, and endure the remaining weeks of camp. Or delve headfirst into the mystery, risking everything to unearth the truth behind cabin 6 and the sleeper. They knew with unwavering certainty that only one path remained. The intoxicating lure of the unknown, the compulsion to understand, proved irresistible. They would unveil whatever lurked within cabin 6, whatever the sacrifice. But as they exited the common room, they couldn't dispel the sensation of walking toward a lurking terror, something that had patiently awaited their arrival. The wind escalated, rustling the leaves, and Alex imagined a faint whisper carried on the breeze, a sibilant murmur that seemed to speak their name. Billy's disappearance. The morning air hung thick and heavy, smelling of damp earth and pine needles. Alex shivered, pulling their thin flannel shirt tighter. They hadn't slept well, the unsettling images from the journal swirling in their mind. Each creak of the cabin, each rustle of leaves outside their window had sounded like a footstep approaching cabin 6. But duty called. Alex forced themselves out of bed, the floorboards cold against their bare feet. The sounds of camp were already beginning, distant laughter, the clatter of breakfast preparations, the mournful croak of a lone crow. They headed to the boys' bunkhouse to wake their assigned group. The familiar chaos of sleepy campers struggling into clothes usually brought a smile to Alex's face, but today a knot of anxiety tightened in their stomach. They pushed open the door, ready with a cheerful greeting, silence. The room was dimly lit, the air still thick with sleep. 4 beds were rumpled, blankets thrown haphazardly, but one was neatly made, the covers pulled taut. Billy's bed. "Guys," Alex said, their voice a little too loud. "Where's Billy?" A chorus of groggy mumbles. "Dunno. Bathroom. Maybe already at breakfast." Alex approached the empty bed. Billy wasn't one to make his bed unless specifically asked. A cold dread washed over them. "Has anyone seen him this morning?" Alex pressed, trying to keep their voice even. The boys exchanged blank stares. No one had. Panic began to bubble in Alex's chest. They ran to the bathroom, calling Billy's name. Empty. They checked the common room, the porch. Nothing. They sprinted towards the mess hall, their heart hammering against their ribs. Ms. Griselda was already there, overseeing the breakfast preparations with her usual brisk efficiency. "Ms. Griselda," Alex called, breathless. "Billy's missing." Ms. Griselda's face, usually a study in stern disapproval, flickered with something that might have been fear, but it was gone so quickly, Alex couldn't be sure. "Missing?" she repeated, her voice sharp. "What do you mean, missing?" Alex explained, stumbling over their words, the anxiety making it hard to breathe. Ms. Griselda's lips thinned. "He probably just wandered off. Boys will be boys." But her eyes betrayed her words. She knew something wasn't right. "Everyone," she announced, clapping her hands sharply to get the attention of the other counselors and kitchen staff. "Billy is unaccounted for. We need to find him. Now I want search parties organized. Check everywhere. The woods, the lakefront, the activity areas. Leave no stone unturned." The mess hall erupted in a flurry of activity. Counselors grabbed whistles and clipboards. The kitchen staff abandoned their breakfast preparations. A sense of urgency, bordering on hysteria, filled the air. Alex stood frozen, watching the chaos unfold. A wave of guilt washed over them. They had been so preoccupied with the journal, with cabin 6, that they hadn't paid enough attention to their campers. Had Billy tried to tell them something? Had he seen something? The search parties fanned out across the camp, their calls of "Billy" echoing through the trees. Alex joined one of the groups, their mind racing. They searched the familiar trails, the sports field, even the arts and crafts cabin, now eerily silent. Each empty space, each unanswered call, fueled their growing fear. The other counselors tried to reassure them, repeating Ms. Griselda's words about boys being boys, about Billy probably just playing a prank. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. As the search wore on, the atmosphere grew heavier. The initial panic subsided, replaced by a grim determination. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to mock their efforts. They reached the edge of the forbidden zone, the area surrounding Cabin 6. A palpable sense of dread hung in the air. Even the birds seemed to have fallen silent. "We can't go any further," said Mark, the head counselor, his voice low. Ms. Griselda's orders were not allowed near cabin 6. Alex stared at the boarded-up structure, its blacked-out windows like empty eyes. The journal's final entry echoed in their mind. The sleeper is inside. But what if he's in there? Alex argued, their voice trembling. What if Billy's in cabin 6? Mark shook his head. It's locked up tight. No one can get in. Besides, he added, lowering his voice even further, you know the stories. It's best to leave it alone. Alex knew the stories. Everyone at Camp Lake Gloom knew the stories. But they couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that Billy was in danger, that cabin 6 was somehow involved. As the search party turned back, Alex lingered for a moment, their gaze fixed on the ominous cabin. A glint of something metallic caught their eye. Half hidden in the overgrown grass near the cabin's foundation lay a small, tarnished object. Alex hesitated. They knew they shouldn't be here, that they were defying Ms. Griselda's orders, but they couldn't resist the pull. They crept closer, their heart pounding in their chest. They reached down and picked up the object. It was a small silver whistle, engraved with the initials BT, Billy's whistle, the one he always carried with him. Alex's breath hitched in their throat. Billy had been here, near cabin 6. They clenched the whistle in their hand, their knuckles white. Whatever was happening, whatever secrets Camp Lake Gloom was hiding, Alex was determined to uncover them, even if it meant facing the darkness alone. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the camp. The search for Billy had been called off for the night. Exhausted and defeated, the counselors and campers trudged back to their cabins, the silence punctuated only by the occasional sob. Alex sat alone on the porch of their cabin, staring out at the darkening woods. The silver whistle lay heavy in their hand, a tangible reminder of the missing boy and the unanswered questions. The other campers were unusually quiet, the carefree spirit of summer camp replaced by a somber unease. Even the counselors seemed subdued, their usual jovial banter replaced by hushed whispers and worried glances. As darkness descended, the familiar sounds of the forest seemed amplified, each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig sounding like a footstep approaching. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was lurking just beyond the edge of the light. They knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the bone, that Billy's disappearance was connected to cabin 6, and they knew that they couldn't rest until they uncovered the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. They thought they saw movement in the woods near cabin 6, but it was gone when they focused, leaving only shadows. But the silence was broken by a faint sound, a sound that made the hairs on the back of Alex's neck stand on end, a low, guttural growl coming from the direction of cabin 6. It was the same growl they'd heard on their first night, and this time it was closer. Claw marks in the woods. The air felt like a clammy hand pressed against Alex's skin. The search team, a motley crew of counselors and older campers, spread out through the timber. Beams of light sliced through the gloom, etching fleeting circles on the forest floor. The usual evening serenade of insects had vanished, replaced by rustling leaves and the hushed anxieties of the group. "Billy! Billy!" Alex's voice, raspy from repeated calls, cut through the stillness. Dread coiled in their stomach. Billy, a kid prone to spooky tales but blessed with an infectious grin, was out there somewhere, vulnerable. The thought was excruciating. Mr. Henderson, the camp director, labored at the front, his expression a strained facade of composure. "Fan out! Keep each other in earshot!" he bellowed. the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet. He couldn't have wandered off too far. But a cold certainty gripped Alex. Billy was gone. Too far. The discarded whistle near cabin 6 served as a grim marker, drawing them deeper into something ominous. They pushed onward, the trees looming taller, their branches a tangled web overhead. Alex's flashlight beam skipped across knotted roots and lichen-covered rocks. Each snapped twig sent a jolt of alarm. "Anything?" Henderson's voice cracked slightly. A wave of negative replies echoed back. Alex pressed on, eyes peeled for any trace of the missing boy. A stray candy wrapper, a disturbed patch of earth. A clue. Nothing. Only the crushing silence of the woods, competing with the frantic drumbeat in their chest. Nearing the forbidden perimeter of cabin 6, an insidious shift in the atmosphere became clear. The air plummeted in temperature, a glacial chill that seeped into their bones. A musky, vaguely metallic odor permeated the air, heavy and sickeningly sweet. The trees appeared warped, twisted into grotesque shapes, their bark a tapestry of scars. Suddenly Sarah, normally buoyant and unflappable, choked back a gasp. "What? What is that?" Alex followed her line of sight. Sarah was fixated on a massive oak, its trunk marked by deep, vicious rents. Approaching cautiously, they focused their lights on the tree. These were no mere animal scratches nor human-made carvings. Instead, deep, deliberate gouges looked as if something massive had raked claws down the trunk. Torn and fractured, the wood revealed the pale interior beneath. A ripple of hushed voices spread through the searchers. Even Henderson looked unnerved, his forced bravado replaced by a sickly pallor. Alex cautiously reached out, tracing the jagged edges of the wounds. They felt unnaturally cold. A shiver snaked down their spine. "Dear?" Mark, the head counselor, suggested weakly, doubt coloring his tone. "Deer don't have claws like that," Sarah whispered. Circling the oak, Alex inspected the marks from every angle. Too high for a bear, too precise for a wild animal attack, and too wrong. An inherent wrongness radiated from them, mirroring the unsettling mood of the woods. More trees displayed identical wounds, each a testament to an unseen power. The claw marks concentrated near cabin 6, as if something had paced restlessly. The quiet stretched, broken only by the strident call of a lone cicada. The tension in the air was a palpable weight. Everyone felt it, the chilling realization they faced something beyond understanding. "We have to find Billy," Alex stated, their voice firm despite trembling hands. "But we have to be careful. Something's happening here." Henderson swallowed hard, his gaze darting nervously. "All right," he declared, regaining a semblance of command. "Everyone stays close. We stick together, and we avoid cabin 6. Understood?" A chorus of affirmations echoed through the trees, though fear shone in every eye. The claw marks had irrevocably altered the landscape. They were no longer simply searching for a lost boy. They were searching for him in a place clearly tainted, a place where something unnatural waited in the shadows. As the search party moved, Alex lingered, fixed on the gashes in the trees. The metallic scent intensified, and a low, guttural growl drifted from the distance. Faint, barely audible, but Alex registered it, and a chilling certainty washed over them. They weren't alone. They turned and hurried after the others, heart hammering. The woods, once a place of mystery and charm, had become a place of dread, and approaching cabin 6 only amplified that terror. Alex felt, with growing unease, that they stood on the brink of discovering something awful, something that would forever alter their perception of Camp Lake Gloom. Another one gone. A metallic sharpness still clung to the atmosphere, a faint but distinct residue as Alex patrolled the rows of cabins. The previous night's unsettling discovery was etched into their memory: scarred trees, a scent reminiscent of blood mixed with iron. Something was deeply amiss. Sleep brought no solace, only visions of gnarled boughs and predatory eyes burning in the gloom. The morning's fragile peace shattered with a scream, a sound not of childish glee by the lake, but a ragged, panicked cry that tore through the stillness. Alex bolted toward the girls' cabins, their pulse a frantic drum against their ribs. Bedlam reigned. Girls spilled from their quarters, some weeping, others their eyes wide saucers of fright. Mrs. Davison, face ashen, struggled to restore order, her voice cracking as she pleaded for silence. "Sarah, she's gone!" A girl with braided hair sobbed, clutching a worn teddy bear. "She's not in her bed!" Alex shouldered through the crowd, reaching Mrs. Davison. "What's happened?" "Sarah, she's a sleepwalker," Mrs. Davison explained, her voice trembling. "It's happened a few times this summer. We usually find her near the dining hall or the water, but she's nowhere. We searched everywhere." Sleepwalking. The irony stung. First Billy, then Sarah. 2 campers vanished, leaving behind only dread and a host of unanswered questions. The air hung thick, saturated with apprehension. The other counselors, jolted awake by the commotion, joined the hunt. They spread out across the camp, calling Sarah's name, their voices tight with urgency and encroaching despair. Alex joined the search party, methodically canvassing each structure, peering into every darkened recess. The recreation hall, the craft studio, even the musty supply shed, all yielded nothing. Initial panic gave way to a grimly resolute quest. The sun climbed, casting elongated, distorted shadows, twisting the familiar landscape into something alien and foreboding. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every snap of a twig sent icy tendrils snaking down Alex's spine. Once carefree, the children now huddled in small clusters, their expressions mirroring adult anxieties. The camp's lost innocence felt heavy, a palpable burden weighing down everyone. Alex spotted Mr. Henderson near the tree line, his features etched with worry. He stared intently at the ground, brow furrowed in thought. "Anything?" Alex inquired. Mr. Henderson shook his head. "No sign of her, no tracks, no disruption. It's as if she evaporated." He nudged a loose rock, sending it tumbling into the underbrush, just like Billy. The unspoken comparison hung between them, a heavy weight of implication. 2 vanished campers, both without a trace. The odds of coincidence felt impossibly remote. "We have to find her," Alex asserted, their voice steady despite the knot of fear coiling in their gut. "We can't give up." Mr. Henderson looked at Alex, his eyes holding a weariness that seemed to age him in an instant. "I know, Alex, I know, but what if we're facing something beyond our understanding?" The question echoed the growing disquiet within Alex. The claw marks, the iron tang, the unnatural quiet of the woods. It all suggested forces beyond the realm of human experience, something sinister. The day wore on, but as twilight began to bleed across the sky, hopelessness settled over the camp like a shroud. The counselors gathered in the mess hall, their faces masks of fatigue and dismay. Even Mrs. Peterson, the usually jovial cook, was subdued, serving a silent, mournful supper. The campers toyed with their food, their appetites gone. The silence was punctuated only by stifled sobs or the soft clink of silverware against plates. Alex watched them, a surge of protectiveness rising within them. Just kids, innocent and vulnerable, trapped in a waking nightmare. As darkness deepened, fear tightened its grip. The counselors organized a night watch, patrolling the grounds in pairs, their flashlights slicing through the impenetrable black. Alex partnered with Mark, a lean, anxious counselor who flinched at every fleeting shadow. They walked the camp's edge, their footsteps muffled by the yielding earth. The woods seemed to close in, branches reaching like skeletal fingers in the darkness. The nocturnal sounds, the owl's mournful hoot, the cricket's insistent chirping, seemed amplified, distorted, laced with a subtle menace. "I don't like this, Alex," Mark whispered, his voice barely audible. "I really don't like this. What if whatever took Billy got Sarah too?" Alex offered no reply, unwilling to articulate the very fears that plagued their own mind. The awful truth simmered beneath the surface. Something was unfolding at Camp Lake Gloom, something steeped in darkness and dread. Back in their cabin, sleep evaded Alex. The specter of Sarah's empty bed haunted them. They thrashed, their mind a whirlwind, desperately attempting to connect the scattered clues. Cabin 6, the clawed trees, the metallic scent, the missing campers. It had to be linked. Driven by a feverish need for answers, Alex slipped from their cot and stole out of the cabin. Silence enveloped the camp, bathed in the moon's pale glow. The only sound, the gentle murmur of the lake against the shore. Alex moved toward cabin 6, the forbidden cabin, the apparent epicenter of their woes. As they drew closer, the air turned frigid, a tangible cold that penetrated to the core. The cabin materialized before them, a shadowy, forbidding silhouette against the lunar canvas. The boarded windows seemed to watch them, like dark hollows in a skull. Alex paused, hand hovering near the rotting wood of the door. They knew they shouldn't be here. They knew it was reckless, but turning back was impossible. Not now, not when Sarah's survival might hinge on it. Taking a steadying breath, Alex reached out and pried at one of the loosened planks nailed across the doorway. It groaned and creaked, resisting the intrusion. With a final wrench, the board gave way, leaving a narrow fissure just large enough to peer inside. Alex leaned forward, their heart hammering wildly. The cabin's interior was consumed by absolute, impenetrable darkness, but as their eyes slowly adjusted, shapes began to emerge, furniture shrouded in dust-laden cloths, a cobwebbed chandelier hanging limply from the ceiling, and in the furthest corner, a looming, obscure form that sent a bolt of pure, instinctive terror through their veins. It felt like someone else was gone, too, confiding in Emily. The mess hall hummed with unease. Counselors, their faces gaunt and pasty under the glaring lights, moved with rigid, almost programmed motions. Breakfast went largely untouched. Pancakes, normally annihilated within moments, lay cooling on plates like discarded tires. Sarah's vacant spot at the table's edge was a chilling reminder of the creeping dread that had settled over Camp Lake Gloom. Alex toyed with a strip of bacon, their stomach a knot of anxiety. Sleep had been elusive, the grotesque image from cabin 6 seared onto the back of their eyelids. A phantom metallic taste coated their tongue. They had to confide in someone who wouldn't just write them off as overwrought. Emily. She possessed a knack for observation, a talent for spotting what others missed, and when Billy vanished, she hadn't seemed shocked exactly, more resigned. Locating Emily proved challenging. The arts and crafts cabin was empty, as was her usual sketching spot by the lake. Finally, Alex discovered her perched on the recreation hall steps, a half-finished friendship bracelet drooping from her hand. She stared blankly at the fog-drenched lake, her expression impossible to decipher. "Hey," Alex ventured softly, settling beside her. Emily didn't startle, but her eyes remained glued to the water. "Hey yourself." "Sleepless night?" Alex paused. "It's more profound than that. I need to tell you something. Promise you won't lose it." A ghost of a smile touched Emily's lips. Lose it? Me? Please. Yet a glint of something akin to Alex's own fear flickered in her gaze. Alex retrieved the journal from their pack, the aged leather feeling cool and grounding against their trembling fingers. I found this in the shed. Belonged to someone who worked here a long time ago. Emily accepted the journal, her brow creasing as she scanned the time-worn pages. Silence descended, broken only by the distant mournful cry of a crow. "This is intense," she breathed finally, her voice barely audible. "Cabin 6, the sleeper. What does it signify?" Alex inhaled deeply. I suspect it ties into the missing kids, Billy, and now Sarah." They recounted their experience in Cabin 6, describing the suffocating gloom, that coppery scent, the oppressive presence they couldn't quite articulate. Emily listened intently, her usual sunny disposition replaced by a serious intensity. When Alex finished, she remained silent for a long beat. I've perceived things too," she admitted quietly. "Things I've kept to myself, thinking I was losing my grip." Alex's hopes surged. They weren't alone in this. "Like what?" "Shadows," Emily whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Flickering at the edge of my vision, always near the woods, and sometimes, at night, I hear chanting, faint, as if emanating from the heart of the forest." She shivered despite the mild air. "And the fog. It's been heavier this summer, hasn't it? It feels malevolent, like it's watching." Alex nodded, a shiver cascading down their back. "That feeling of being scrutinized, I've felt it too." "There's one more thing," Emily pressed on, her voice wavering. "That supply run we made last week? To that antique general store a few towns away?" Alex nodded, recalling the dusty shelves and the unnerving stillness of the place. "The owner, he asked if I worked at Camp Lake Gloom. I said yes, and he just fixed me with this look. Then he intoned, 'That place, it has a hunger,' and refused to elaborate further. The fragmented pieces were aligning, painting a ghastly tableau. The journal, the vanished children, the shadows, the incantations, the fog, and Cabin 6, the epicenter of it all. "We have to intervene," Alex declared, their voice unwavering despite the dread clawing at their insides. "We can't just stand idly by while another kid disappears." Emily glanced at the journal in her grasp, then back at Alex, her eyes a mixture of terror and resolve. "You're right, but what can we possibly do? Everyone's too petrified to even whisper about Cabin 6. "We investigate," Alex breathed. "We unearth the truth. Together." Emily took a steadying breath, the fear in her eyes hardening into determination. "Agreed, but we tread carefully. If what you encountered is genuine, we're contending with something dangerous." "I know," Alex replied, "but fear can't paralyze us." The remainder of the morning was devoted to the journal, its cryptic passages their focus. The author, a counselor named Daniel, wrote of bizarre rituals, oblations, and an encroaching darkness that was swallowing the camp whole. He referenced the sleeper incessantly, alluding to a being of immeasurable power intertwined with Cabin 6. "What are we to make of this oblation talk?" Emily probed, her voice constricted with apprehension. Alex swallowed thickly. "I'd rather not contemplate it." They elected to concentrate on the immediate objective, re-entering Cabin 6 during daylight when others were present. "We require a plan," Emily said, tapping a nail against the journal. "We can't merely stroll up and try to force entry. Someone will witness us." Alex considered this. "The maintenance shed. Old Man Hemlock always stashes the key under the flower pot. We grab some tools, pretend we're repairing a loose board on another cabin." Emily nodded. "Excellent." and we remain united, whatever we encounter. As they solidified their strategy, a sense of grim purpose settled upon them. Two fledgling counselors, armed with a worn journal and a mutual sense of foreboding. But they were also the only ones prepared to confront the darkness festering at Camp Lake Gloom. The sun began its descent, painting elongated spectral shadows across the grounds. The usual sounds of childish merriment were suppressed, supplanted by an unnerving hush. The air grew dense, pregnant with anticipation and fear. As they readied to execute their plan, Alex couldn't shake the premonition that they were walking directly into a snare. But retreat was no longer an option. The fate of Camp Lake Gloom, and perhaps something infinitely more sinister, rested squarely on their shoulders. Breaking into Cabin 6. "All right, here's the breakdown," Alex breathed, huddled with Emily behind the mess hall. The acrid tang of incinerated frankfurters lingered, a culinary crime scene. "Griselda patrols the cabins around 9 sharp. We lie low until she clears number 5. Then it's go time." Emily worried her thumbnail, her usual sunny disposition eclipsed by a jitters that mirrored Alex's. "And if she spots us?" Alex unfurled a crumpled napkin, smoothing the rough sketch of the cabin layout against the tree's bark. "Won't happen. We hug the shadows, move like ghosts. We'll be in and out before she even suspects a thing." The bravado felt thin, even to Alex. Facing Miss Griselda's ire felt only marginally better than whatever festered inside Cabin 6. Marginally. "What about the other chaperones?" Emily's voice was a near inaudible thread against the backdrop of chirping insects. "Either on duty or already crashed in their bunks," Alex countered, flicking a glance toward the faintly lit staff quarters. "Besides, who'd willingly traipse around in this pea soup?" Indeed, a dense fog had crept in, a spectral shroud that muted sounds and blurred the edges of reality, either perfect camouflage or an omen. Alex couldn't decide. A quick, shared glance confirmed their readiness. Alex clutched a miniature flashlight and multi-tool. Emily, a notebook and pen poised to record their findings. Time stretched agonizingly. Alex tracked the bobbing lamplight of Ms. Griselda's circuit as it inched past Cabin 5, then 4. "Now," Alex rasped, tugging Emily's sleeve. They shot forward, weaving between the trees, their footfalls deadened by the damp soil and the smothering mist. A chill permeated the air as they neared Cabin 6, the silence deepening into an oppressive hush. Its boarded-up windows seemed to glare with vacant malevolence. The very wood was decaying, mottled with patches of bilious green. Reaching the structure first, Alex's heart hammered against their ribs. A palpable wrongness saturated the atmosphere, raising gooseflesh on their arms. "Okay," they managed, their voice wavering slightly. "Remember the drill. Stay glued together, hands off unless absolutely necessary, and extraction the instant we find something." Emily nodded, eyes wide saucers. "Right, together." They skirted the perimeter, hunting for a point of entry. The front door was fortified with heavy bolts, the windows entombed behind thick, nailed-down planks. "There," Emily breathed, gesturing to a section along the rear wall. "That board looks a bit wonky." Alex scrutinized the wood, warped and fractured, its nails red with rust and bent at odd angles. Employing the multi-tool, Alex painstakingly worked at the board, the aged timber offering a mournful protest. Precious minutes ticked by, the stillness punctuated only by the wood's groans and their own shallow gasps. Finally, with a splintering crack, the board yielded, leaving a space just wide enough for a squeeze. "Ladies first," Alex offered, stepping back. Emily faltered, her gaze locked on the inky aperture. "Are you sure about this, Alex? We could just spill everything to Ms. Griselda." And have her pat us on the head and tell us we're imagining things? Or worse, ship us home? Alex shook their head adamantly. Nope. We're the only ones who can unravel this. Now, let's go. Emily inhaled deeply and contorted herself through the opening, vanishing into the gloom. Alex followed close on her heels, wrestling the board back into approximate position. The cabin interior reeked of mold and rot. Dust motes pirouetted in the feeble beam of Alex's flashlight, illuminating a single cavernous space. Furniture draped in white sheets stood like spectral sentinels in the dimness. "This joint gives me the creeps," Emily murmured, her voice echoing strangely in the oppressive quiet. Alex swept the beam around the room, cataloging the details. The floorboards buckled and groaned underfoot. The wallpaper hung in tattered streamers. Cobwebs, like morbid bunting, festooned every corner. Then they spotted them, bizarre symbols etched into the walls. Unlike anything Alex had ever encountered, a network of interlocking circles and triangles filled with swirling lines and enigmatic dots. Some were carved deeply into the wood, others appeared to be rendered in charcoal or paint. "What are those things?" Emily questioned, her voice tinged with fear. She meticulously copied one of the symbols into her notebook. "I have no clue," Alex admitted, their pulse quickening. "But I'm not digging it." They proceeded cautiously, exploring the expanse. In one alcove, they found a pile of antiquated tomes, their covers ripped and faded beyond recognition. Alex picked one up, dusting it off. The title was scrawled in an unfamiliar script, the characters sharp and alien. Suddenly, Emily gasped. "Alex, look!" She pointed to a section of the far wall. Initially, it appeared to be a continuation of the decaying space, blanketed in flaking wallpaper. But upon closer scrutiny, Alex perceived a subtle delineation, a variation in the wall's texture, a hidden doorway. Alex breathed. They ran their fingers along the wall's surface, seeking a latch or handle. Finally, Alex located a small, almost imperceptible button concealed beneath a loose shard of wallpaper. They depressed it, and with a soft click, a segment of the wall pivoted inward, revealing a cramped passageway. The air surging from the opening was frigid, heavy, laced with a subtle metallic tang. Alex hesitated, peering into the abyss. "Ready?" Emily swallowed hard, but nodded. "Let's do this." They squeezed through the clandestine portal, venturing into the unknown. The passage was confining and airless, the walls clammy and ice-cold. The sole illumination emanated from Alex's flashlight, casting elongated, distorted shadows that danced erratically. The corridor opened into a small, circular chamber. At its heart stood a weathered clock, its pendulum suspended in time, cracks webbed across its face, its hands frozen at an indecipherable hour. Encircling the chamber, shelves carved into the walls held a collection of oddities, jars filled with viscous fluids, bones, and other indecipherable artifacts. A wave of nausea threatened to overwhelm Alex. This place exuded wrongness, a deep-seated corruption they needed to escape. "We should bail," Alex urged, gripping Emily's arm. "Now." Yet Emily remained rooted to the spot, transfixed by the clock, her eyes glazed over. "It's exquisite," she breathed, reaching out to caress the fractured glass. "Emily, don't!" Alex shouted, attempting to yank her back. But it was too late. As Emily's fingertips brushed against the clock face, a low hum resonated through the chamber, escalating into a near-deafening crescendo. The very air vibrated, and the symbols adorning the walls began to glow with an eerie, pulsating light. The clock shuddered, its pendulum commencing its rhythmic swing, as if resurrected from an age of dormancy. Alex knew, with a dread that settled deep in their bones, that they had roused something dreadful. The sleeper awakens. The air in the chamber grew heavy, a tangible weight on Alex's lungs. The clocks ticking, once a background drone, now hammered in the echoing silence. A guttural rumble rolled from the gloom, prickling Alex's skin with dread. This wasn't the sound of any beast. It resonated from something fundamentally askew. Emily clutched at Alex's forearm, nails biting into their flesh. "Did you hear that?" Her whisper trembled like a leaf. Alex could only nod, their pulse a frantic drum against their ribs. Eyes darted, attempting to penetrate the murk, but shadows clung to the chamber's edges like grasping talons. "We're not alone," Alex choked out, fear a cold hand on their throat. A presence peeled itself away from the inky blackness. It was Ms. Griselda, yet irrevocably altered. The familiar stoop had vanished, her gaze blazed with an unholy fire, and her face, usually etched with wrinkles of disapproval, was twisted into a horrifying leer. The delicate floral perfume she favored had been supplanted by a rank, earthy stench, a miasma of rot and damp earth. "You should not have trespassed," Ms. Griselda croaked, the words a gravelly echo of her former voice, like rusted gears grinding against each other. Alex recoiled, drawing Emily back. "Ms. Griselda, what is happening?" The woman, the thing wearing Ms. Griselda's form, advanced, her long knotted fingers flexing menacingly. "I am the guardian. For centuries I have watched over the sleeper." Emily gasped, her breath catching in her throat. "The sleeper? What are you talking about?" A dry, mirthless chuckle rattled in Ms. Griselda's chest, grating on Alex's nerves. Inquisitive children, consumed by curiosity, you simply had to interfere, didn't you? Now, willingly or not, you will learn the truth. She raised a hand, and the strange glyphs carved into the chamber walls began to pulse with the same eerie luminescence as her eyes. The very air thrummed, and the clock's ticking escalated, transforming into a rhythmic palpitation that vibrated within Alex's very bones. This camp, this lake, all erected as a vessel to contain it, to satiate it. Ms. Griselda continued, her voice swelling with newfound power. Generations have offered themselves willingly, sacrifices to keep the sleeper dormant. A wave of nausea swept over Alex. Sacrifices? What appalling revelation lay behind that word. The missing campers, they breathed, the horrifying conjecture solidifying. Amusement flickered in Ms. Griselda's gaze. Indeed, the missing, an indispensable offering. The sleeper demands sustenance, a taste of innocence, a brush of fear. These keep it subdued. Emily shrank back, her face drained of color. That's madness. Madness. Ms. Griselda's head cocked to one side, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. No, child, preservation. Do you truly believe this world is secure? Do you imagine you are in control? The sleeper possesses a power that dwarfs your comprehension. It could unravel the very fabric of reality. Alex's mind raced, grappling with the immensity of it all. What manner of entity demanded such gruesome tribute? They glanced at Emily, seeing their own terror reflected, and a steely resolve hardened within them. "We won't permit you to harm another soul," Alex declared, their voice wavering yet firm. A chilling laugh cascaded through the chamber, an echo of despair. "You hinder me. You are but insignificant motes of dust. The sleeper stirs, its hunger grows, you cannot restrain it." She lunged, her speed belying her former frail appearance. Alex shoved Emily behind them, raising their hands in a desperate, futile gesture of defense. "Run, Emily! Get out!" Alex screamed. Hesitation flickered across Emily's face, her eyes wide with raw terror, but finally she nodded and spun around, scrambling back towards the concealed passage. Ms. Griselda snarled, reaching for Emily, but Alex hurled themselves forward, tackling the woman around her waist. They crashed to the stone floor, Ms. Griselda's sharp elbows digging into Alex's spine. "You wretched child," Ms. Griselda hissed, wrestling against Alex's hold. "You cannot defy your fate." Alex gritted their teeth, clinging on with grim determination. A direct confrontation was surely doomed, but perhaps they could grant Emily a precious sliver of time. Abruptly, Ms. Griselda's form began to convulse, a grotesque metamorphosis unfolding before their eyes. Her skin rippled and writhed, bones contorted, features dissolving into something monstrously unfamiliar. Her fingers extended into wickedly sharp claws, and her eyes blazed with an even more potent, malignant light. Alex screamed, reflexively releasing their grip. They scrambled backward, heart hammering a frantic tattoo against their ribs. The creature that had once been Ms. Griselda now loomed above them, a horrifying perversion of its former self, a macabre caricature of flesh and bone. Ancient hatred burned in its gaze, and its mouth stretched in a silent, predatory snarl, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. The sleeper was awakening, and its guardian stood ready to defend it. Escape from Lake Gloom. A nauseating energy thrummed in the air as Ms. Griselda, eyes blazing with unnatural light, pounced on Alex. "You will not meddle," she screeched, her voice a grotesque parody of the woman they remembered. Alex recoiled, their heart a frantic drum against their ribs. The transformed counselor moved with unsettling speed, elongated fingers outstretched like talons. They narrowly avoided her initial assault, the displaced air stinging their cheek. "Emily, get out! Warn everyone!" Alex shouted, their blood surging with adrenaline. Emily stood frozen, her face a battleground of terror and grit. "I'm not abandoning you." "You have to," Alex countered, evading another vicious strike. "They need to know. The whole camp. It's vulnerable." A monstrous bellow tore from Ms. Griselda's throat, rattling the cabin's timbers. A claw raked across Alex's upper arm. An excruciating fire erupted as blood bloomed, staining their counselor tea a shocking red. Witnessing the injury, Emily reacted instinctively. She snatched a hefty cast-iron skillet from the grimy kitchen counter, the very pan they'd used to char s'mores, beyond recognition the previous week. With a strangled cry, she swung with all her might, connecting with Ms. Griselda's temple. The transformed woman faltered, momentarily disoriented. It wasn't a knockout blow, but it afforded Alex a critical window. "Go, Emily, now!" Alex yelled, shoving her toward the exit. "Tell everyone to flee. Don't stop until you hit town." Emily gazed at Alex, tears tracing paths through the grime on her face. "But no arguments!" Alex cut her off, their voice cracking with urgency. "Please, Emily, for me, protect them." Emily nodded, a newfound steel glinting in her eyes. She spun and bolted, vanishing into the fog-drenched night. Alex knew they had to buy her time. Their hand closed around a rusted iron poker from beside the dormant fireplace, its serrated edges catching the faint light seeping through the boarded windows. A pitiful defense against whatever Ms. Griselda had become, but the only one available. Ms. Griselda recovered with alarming speed, her luminous eyes locked on Alex with predatory focus. "Foolish child," she rasped, "you cannot halt the inevitable." Alex stood firm, poker raised, their entire frame trembling. "I'm not afraid," they whispered, the words a flimsy shield. Ms. Griselda lunged again, and Alex met her onslaught, driving the poker forward. It found purchase, piercing her shoulder. A shriek, both human and utterly alien, ripped from Miss Griselda as she swatted Alex aside like an irritating insect. They slammed into the wall, the impact stealing their breath. As Miss Griselda stalked closer, the very air seemed to ripple. A deep, primeval growl reverberated from the cabin's depths, vibrating in Alex's bones. The floorboards creaked ominously, and the atmosphere thickened with palpable dread. Ms. Griselda stilled, her glowing eyes widening with a bizarre mix of trepidation and expectation. "The sleeper stirs," she breathed, her voice hushed with awe. Abruptly, Emily reappeared in the doorway, her face ashen but determined. In her grasp, she held a lantern, its flame dancing erratically. "Alex, get out! I have an idea." Before Alex could protest, Emily hurled the lantern toward the center of the room. It shattered against the floor, kerosene spreading rapidly, igniting with an explosive whoosh. Flames erupted, hungrily devouring the walls, the ceiling, bathing the cabin in blinding light and unbearable heat. "Go! Now!" Emily shrieked, her voice nearly swallowed by the inferno's roar. Alex hesitated a heartbeat, a wave of crushing sorrow threatening to drown them. Then they pivoted and ran, escaping the conflagration that had been Cabin 6. They stumbled out into the night, coughing and gasping, the fire's heat searing their lungs. Behind them, the cabin roared, casting grotesque dancing shadows against the surrounding trees. Ignoring the excruciating throb in their arm, Alex bolted toward the main camp, screaming at the top of their lungs. "Everyone, wake up! We have to evacuate! Now!" Chaos descended on the camp. Sleep-dazed campers poured from their cabins, blinking in bewilderment, their faces lit by the inferno's orange glare. Counselors, jolted awake, scrambled to understand the pandemonium. "What's happening?" Another counselor, Mark, bellowed, seizing Alex's arm. "No time," Alex choked out. "Cabin 6, it's compromised. We have to get everyone out of here, immediately." The stark urgency in Alex's voice, the blood-soaked shirt, the sight of the raging blaze, all convinced Mark this was no false alarm. He barked orders, directing counselors to assemble the campers and lead them to the main road. Panic spread like a contagion. Children sobbed, counselors yelled, and the air vibrated with the thud of fleeing feet and cries of fear. Alex, despite their throbbing injury, helped shepherd the younger campers, pushing them forward, urging them onward. Reaching the camp's edge, Alex glanced back. Cabin 6 was now a towering pyre, flames reaching toward the sky, casting an eerie, flickering light across the lake. The fog, instead of stifling the inferno, seemed to amplify it, creating a nightmarish panorama. A crushing wave of grief washed over Alex as they thought of Emily, trapped within that fiery prison. They knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was gone. They suppressed the emotion, focusing on the immediate imperative, safeguarding the campers. Emily's sacrifice would not be in vain. Reaching the main road, the counselors began the arduous task of organizing the terrified campers, counting heads, ensuring no one was left behind. The scene was a maelstrom of emotion, but gradually order emerged from the chaos. As they awaited the arrival of emergency services, Alex stared out at the oppressive, looming forest surrounding Camp Lake Gloom. They knew that even though they had escaped, the true nightmare had only just begun. Whatever malevolent force lurked within those woods, whatever had been unleashed from Cabin 6, remained at large, waiting in the shadows. And they had a growing dread that it would be coming for them. Vanishing act. The air reeked of singed wood and raw panic. Alex, chest aching, hauled Lily forward. The smaller ones, hampered by exhaustion, clung to Alex's hands and each other with white-knuckled desperation. A cacophony of splintering trees and tortured branches pursued them, more than just the blaze. Ms. Griselda, The others, too. Alex chanced a terrified glance over their shoulder. Among the pines, grotesque figures danced in the flickering light, eyes gleaming like hellfire. Counselors once trusted, now warped, unnatural. How many had harbored this darkness all along? Had they been dormant, awaiting a trigger? The sleeper. "Keep going," Alex rasped, throat raw. "We're almost there." They had to be. Alex had been steering them toward the periphery of the camp, the promise of the county road, their only salvation, a distant beacon. "I can't," a voice choked out. It was Mateo, grime-streaked tears carving paths down his cheeks. Alex halted, crouching low, dismissing the encroaching sounds of the hunt. "Yes, you can, Mateo. You're doing brilliantly. Just a little further. Pretend it's the last stretch. We're nearly at the finish." Mateo sniffled, his gaze reflecting pure terror. "But they're gaining." Alex tightened their grip. "I know, but we're faster. We have to be." They locked eyes with him, a silent promise passing between them. "We're in this together, remember?" Alex rose, gently urging Mateo onward. They surged forward. The world became a blur of green and brown. Gnarled roots clawed at their ankles on the uneven ground. Each inhale felt like shards of glass. At last, a break in the trees, the chain-link fence defining Camp Lake Gloom's border. Beyond, the blessed gray of asphalt. Freedom, tangible and potent, flooded through them, injecting new life into their weary limbs. They redoubled their efforts, the sounds of pursuit amplifying their terror. They burst from the woods, stumbling onto the gravel verge. "We did it," Lily gasped, collapsing onto the ground, struggling for breath. The others followed suit, a jumbled mass of limbs and quivering bodies. Alex's gaze swept the desolate road, heart hammering against their ribs, empty, abandoned as always. "Right," Alex said, forcing a tone of confidence. "Let's just catch our breath, then we can walk to the next town. Someone will help." They peered back at the camp, fully expecting the monstrous counselors to materialize from the tree line, but nothing stirred. Only the dense, hushed woods, no licking flames, no choking smoke, no telltale glint of eyes. It was as though it had all been a mirage, a frigid. Apprehension gripped Alex. Impossible. They'd just fled a burning cabin, escaped. That horror. Yet there was no evidence. "Where's the fire gone?" a small voice piped up. It was Sophia, eyes wide with confusion. Alex frantically searched for any indication of the chaos they'd left behind. Only the ordinary, unremarkable forest met their gaze. Then a spectral fog began to seep in, a silent, creeping tide of white. It swallowed the woods whole. The children pressed closer to Alex, their eyes round with dread. The fog reached the fence, and there, inexplicably, it stalled. It pressed against the barrier, a swirling white curtain held back by some unseen force. Then, gradually, impossibly, Camp Lake Gloom started to unravel. Not a sudden snuffing out, but a slow, ethereal fading. The trees appeared to thin, becoming translucent before dissolving into nothingness. The cabins shimmered, their forms blurring and then vanishing into the encroaching fog. Alex stared, bewilderment clouding their mind. The earth beneath them shifted, the familiar dirt and pine needles replaced by nothing, just swirling mist. Within moments, Camp Lake Gloom had been expunged, erased from existence. Only the road remained, stretching into the distance, a lonely gray ribbon slicing through the dense fog. The children were eerily silent, their faces ashen. They stared at the void where the camp had been, their eyes mirroring a combination of fear and utter disbelief. Where did it go?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. Alex didn't know. They couldn't fathom it. Had they imagined it all? Had the stress and terror finally broken them? But they knew they hadn't. The sting of burns still marked their hand. The grime still stained the children's faces. I don't know, Alex admitted, barely audible. But we need to keep moving. They stepped forward onto the road, leaving the edge of the fog behind. As they walked, the silence weighed heavily. The fog pressed in, a suffocating blanket blurring the boundaries of reality. A seed of doubt took root in Alex's mind. Had they truly escaped? Or had they simply stumbled into another, deeper level of nightmare? Was the sleeper still lurking, veiled by the fog, biding its time? They glanced at the children, their faces drawn and etched with fear. They had to shield them. They had to shepherd them to safety. But where was safety to be found when the world itself could dissolve around them? They continued onward, into the fog, into the unknown, the memory of Camp Lake Gloom receding like a fever dream. A dream that felt impossibly real,